Let's start here with, this is quite a nice little story we've developed. First of all, maturity assessments typically are questionnaires that get sent out. People get the questionnaire, they fill in the answers, and then you give them some sort of rating on the maturity scale. And so the first part of what we wanted to do is be able to mimic that situation. So here we've built a story where you can go in, you enter some data here about who the company is and some instructions, and you can see here that we've got all of our questions around maturity. In fact, for our maturity assessment, if I can scroll down very quickly, I've got, so I'm trying to scroll down, it doesn't want to scroll down. There's 190 of them anyway. So there's 190 questions, or 178 it says here, sorry, questions that we've defined. You can change those questions in this form. So, you know, this just happens to be the set of questions we're asking from all of our research. What we then did is you've got an ability to view that. So we're using a feature here where that's pulled together and it's actually putting that into an actual questionnaire. And you can see the desktop and mobile version. And then I can go in and get the link and I can now send that questionnaire to people and they would effectively see something that looked like this. And they could go in and they could start to complete the questionnaire. Okay, so that's the questionnaire part of it, which would be a traditional kind of maturity assessment. And now we've built this story. This is kind of almost, you know, we can ask any questions and send them out to anybody. We can create multiple questionnaires. So we built ourselves a little questionnaire engine, if you want to think of it that way. What we then do, though, is that would be a traditional way of doing it. Let me see if this is the right one. No, that's not the right one. So we go to the other one, sorry. And then I'll go to that one. So what happens is, I'm always picking the wrong one, sorry. I need to there you go. So what we tend to do, because nobody wants to answer 190 questions, is we tend to take a subset of questions. So let's say the client is interested in customer centricity. We take the questions that are associated with customer centricity and we send those out to the group of people who are going to attend the event. So typically you can see in this case, it's 21 questions. They fill those questions in. The data comes back. What we then do, though, is we then open up a virtual event. And in the virtual event, what we can see is the answers to these questions that they've completed in their survey. But we want to explore that. So let's say we're going into delightful products. We will talk about the scores and the range and people's views. And we will have a conversation around this concept that our products and services delight our customers. And once we've had a conversation and listened to the opinions of the group, we'll use the voting widget that you can see here, and people will scan the code or link on the vote. Up will pop the question. I will answer the question. Everybody will answer the question. And effectively, we go back into the vote and I look at the results. And what we can start to see is actually how people voted, having had a discussion about that particular question. So we started to be more transparent. We started to listen to each other's points of view, and we started to understand the topic in a little bit more context maybe than we have done before from different people's perspectives. And so we go through answering those questions. What we can then start to look at is we can start to see how the results changed from the original pre-survey results. So we can see what people initially thought, and then after coming together and listening to each other, what they now think. And then once we've had a discussion around that, we can have a discussion around effectively how that compares with the benchmarks that we have. So this is what we call the fishbowl event, where we're now actually facilitating a virtual meeting around this. Where this all ends up, though, which is really the powerful piece of this, if I go into the actual reporting part, which we then do, is effectively we start to look at actually how the organization scores. So we take that data in and we start to look at how that organization scored itself in terms of the three areas. And we look across three dimensions. We look at the direction setting dimension, the operating model, and the execution. And we can take each of those and we can have a look at those, and we can start to understand actually how the organization's maturity is scoring. And that's quite interesting. And I'd say that that's pretty traditional to most maturity models. What we've done, though, is we've identified effectively that there are threads, there are connections between certain questions, and that we call these golden threads. Remember, we talked about one of those threads being around customer centricity. And so when you look at an organization, it's a lot more complicated than people think. And so if you want to go and have a look at, say, agile practices and governance, what we start to look at now is those two kind of areas, which are the bits around the outside, which are now colored in depending upon how the scoring was. And you can start to see where the items that connect those two areas together. And so we can start to say, well, actually, if you want to get an agile mindset, but also you want to sort the governance out, then there's some things here that you need to actually put in place, right? Like lean budget guide rails are established and dynamically updated. So the maturity is going a lot further into not just an assessment, but actually understanding the connections. And the reason this is important is because what we've started to see was organizations would quite often make a change. Let's say they wanted to drive innovation and they wanted to put innovation labs in place. They would do that. And then after about 18 months, everybody would be saying, we don't really see the value. We're going to stop the funding. And that was because they didn't make the changes in the actual organization that was receiving that innovation to be able to implement it. And so it's really important to manage those connections. So the whole maturity is looking at the ability to score your organization, do it in a collaborative way, look at these dimensions, look at the golden threads and the connectivities, and then start to decide what your next best action is. And this is really starting to help identify what your change leadership plan should be within the organization. So that's quite an interesting story, and one that really is very hot for us at the moment in terms of organizations, because everybody wants to be an agile organization. Everybody wants to move at pace and process change faster. But the next question is, what does that look like? And what do I need to change? And this is where something like this can help.